combating nutrition disinformation and general bull. It's Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another Instagram Live, and we have another episode of Jimmy Rants in store for you here today, so welcome in. If you're brand new to Jimmy Rants, head on over to JimmyRants.com. You'll see that we start off on Instagram. We do a live video a couple times a day, so go follow me on Instagram. Then low carb, whoa, my camera turned around, hang on. I don't know what happened. Living Low Carb Man is who I am, or it's the cloudy sky in front of the dumpster that you see. Living Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. And then you can watch it live, just like B-Cob 1 and Keto Neogenesis and Holly and Bertrand and the Mindful Mirror and Nick and Jackie and Keto Selena. All these guys are already here waiting for the content today to engage live. Then it's up for 24 hours on replay that you can watch it there. And then it disappears after 24 hours. We pop it on over to YouTube so you can watch the past episodes that are archived there. And then finally, the Jimmy Rants podcast is on Apple Podcasts. Go listen to the show there. Leave us a review. Again, you guys, all of this is at JimmyRants.com. Today's Jimmy Rants is kind of a continuation of what I had done yesterday on a previous Jimmy Rants. And I was showing you this Costco Connection magazine. And so this is the one for January of 2019. And of course, January is where all of these stores always tend to highlight kind of diet and health stuff because people make New Year's resolutions. It's at the top of their mind. And so they're providing content that they think will help people who are seeking New Year's resolutions. So they have this little special section for your health. And in this section, eating to stop inflammation. And so, okay, I'm reading this. The right diet may help ease your chronic pain and other illnesses. So what I wanted to talk about here today is the reason why keto works is because it's anti-inflammatory. I want to come back to that in a minute. First, let's take a look at what they think is anti-inflammatory. So they quote Dr. Barry Sears. You may remember his name if you've been around a long time. He's the guy that came up with the zone diet, which is 40% carbohydrate, 30% fat, and 30% protein. It's supposedly a balanced diet, the way you feed yourself. He calls it the zone diet. So in here, they quote all kinds of people, but I wanted to bring up some of the things they talked about inflammation. So there are several anti-inflammatory diet trends right now. It can be hard to choose which one is that will work for you. They call it an AI diet, anti-inflammation diet. It's not a traditional weight loss diet, but a lifestyle change. Dr. Sears says that an AI diet is one that consistently reduces the inflammatory response over an extended period of time. And the main sources of inflammation, they say, are stress, which I agree with, alcohol, smoking, and pollution, as well as the kinds of foods that we eat, which is what they get into here. So let's take a look at what they think is the foods and supplements that make up an anti-inflammatory diet. You ready for this? Dr. Sears says you need to eat low-fat proteins with a lot of vegetables, limited fruit, and only a small, very small amount of monounsaturated fats. You need to also supplement your diet with omega-3 fatty acid supplementation. So the foods like cruciferous vegetables, tomatoes, green leafy vegetables, peppers, deep-colored fruits, sweet potatoes, whole grains, beans, omega-3 fatty foods, fish, raw nuts, including walnuts and almonds, dark chocolate, herbs, and spices. The things to avoid are processed foods, refined carbohydrates, trans fats, alcohol, sugary beverages, and greasy foods. Okay. With all due respect to Dr. Sears, most of that list of foods would inflame my body. It really would. And it would inflame my body because of several things. Not just the direct inflammation that would come from consuming them, because most of those are real whole foods, so kudos to him for that. But this is one of those cases where real whole foods alone is not the answer. Those real whole foods of beans and whole grains, for example, they will raise my insulin. They'll spike my blood sugar, they'll raise my insulin. Well, guess what happens when you spike your insulin levels? You have an inflammation response. And so for him to call it an anti-inflammatory diet to eat these things is a little disingenuous. Sweet potatoes, same thing. I wish I could eat sweet potatoes on a regular basis. I wish I could eat deep-colored fruits. I'm assuming he's referring to berries, because strawberries and blueberries would be deep-colored. But maybe he considers bananas deep-colored. I don't know. But some of these other foods are fine. Then the problem with this is it's half right. And so people will read this and go, oh, well, yeah, low-fat protein, that makes sense. No, it doesn't. He has no mention in here about red meat. None. None whatsoever. The only source of protein beyond the whole grains and the beans, the only source of protein in his list of foods is fatty fish. That's it. That's it. And so I'm not a pescatarian, Dr. Sears. I'm sorry. Keto doesn't have to be fish only. There is nothing wrong with red meat. Animal-based foods are a great source of complete proteins if you get the fattiest choices of meats, not the low-fat versions. You can actually live happy and healthy. And this, you guys, is why keto works. It is anti-inflammatory. Now, watching Christine go through the nutritional therapy practitioner program, I learned something I did not know prior to her going through that program about the kinds of fats. Did you know that saturated fat is inflammatory? It is. But it's inflammatory by design because healing in the body can't take place unless the body is inflamed first. And so that's why their recommendations are that you have 60% of your fat in your diet being monounsaturated fat. So what's that? That could be avocado oil. That could be olive oil. That could be the natural monounsaturated fats that are in various foods. I don't think we need to worry about this a whole lot, but it is one of those cases where Dr. Sears is taking it to the extreme. Well, because saturated fats can be inflammatory, we all know that's a bad thing, and therefore you should cut your saturated fat. I'm like, no. You still need the saturated fat in your diet. You still want to have butter and coconut oil and lard and full-fat meats and cheeses and all those things that make up the wonderfulness that are the keto foods that are saturated fat sources. But you also want monounsaturated. And here's a dirty little secret they never talk about with red meat. They always talk about, oh, that high saturated fat in red meat. Lean in close, because I got some revelation for you. Most of the fat that's in red meat is monounsaturated fat, especially when you choose grass-fed meats. So get the best quality sources of meat, and about 55% of the fat in there is considered monounsaturated fat, not saturated. And so, again, if you're just joining us, I'm reading from an article in the Costco Connection for January 2019, and I have it marked. Got a little dog-eared there because it was talking about eating to stop inflammation. And they're quoting very heavily in here from Dr. Barry Sears, the guy that came up with the zone diet. And he's making the claim that an anti-inflammatory diet is one that has cruciferous vegetables, tomatoes, leafy greens, peppers, deep-colored fruits, sweet potatoes, whole grains, beans, omega-3 fatty acids, fish, raw nuts, dark chocolate, herbs, and spices. Okay? So I'm making the argument that if you're eating keto with good quality foods, real whole foods, not including whole grains, sweet potatoes, beans, you don't need all that crap. Just eat real whole food sources of quality, complete proteins from red meat, and organic vegetables, green leafy, mostly vegetables. And then add in appropriate amounts of fat from avocados, avocado oil, olive oil, whatever floats your boat when it comes to fat. That's going to be anti-inflammatory too. And I hate that there's this kind of war about, well, my anti-inflammatory diet's better than yours. Guys, you can see how well your anti-inflammatory diet is doing by actually testing for inflammation in the blood. So there's 3 markers. The next time you go see your doctor, I want you to ask to have run, okay? One is called a homocysteine. That is a marker that's very easy. All 3 of these are very easy for your doctor to run. So homocysteine, IGF-1. So IGF-1. That's another one. But a very popular one, and I've talked about this in my books before, is HSCRP. So that stands for high sensitivity C-reactive protein. That's probably the easiest one to convince your doctor to run. Homocysteine's pretty easy too. IGF-1's a little more sophisticated. But as for the high sensitivity C-reactive protein, in fact, if you say it all out like that, you may blow your doctor's mind. And that's a key inflammation marker in the body. And if you have that run and that number comes back under 3, you got pretty low inflammation. And you can say, hey, look, I'm eating a ketogenic diet. And that's how I got that number. Now, most people eating keto will have much less than 3. Most of us tend to have around 1 or below. So 1 or less. My latest one that I had run a couple months ago was 1.1. So it's right where you want it to be, an anti-inflammatory diet showing up in an inflammation marker. So it's one thing to talk about an anti-inflammatory diet and what it takes to be anti-inflammatory, but it's another thing to actually check to see, is it actually working to lower inflammation? So the curiosity that is in my brain wants me to try eating cruciferous vegetables, tomatoes, leafy greens, peppers, deep-colored fruits, sweet potatoes, whole grains, beans, fatty foods, fish, raw nuts, dark chocolate, herbs, and spices, and to see what happens to that HSCRP. I would predict it would go up. I don't know. I don't really want to go through all that because I love red meat too much. And there's no mention of eggs in there anywhere. Why aren't eggs in an anti-inflammatory diet? They should be. Why isn't dairy in there? Now, I know dairy is sensitive. Some people are sensitive to dairy, and I get it. Some people would have an inflammatory response to that, but not everybody. And so again, within the context of a ketogenic diet, why are we dismissing this as an option for people seeking to be anti-inflammatory? So the bottom line in this Jimmy Rant, you guys, is keto works precisely because it is anti-inflammatory. And so you're going to read articles about controlling inflammation and eating to stop inflammation and what's the right diet that will ease chronic pain and other illness that's caused by inflammation. Keto's a part of that. Keto is the answer for a lot of people. And here's one last thing to think about regarding inflammation. It's not just about acute pain that you're having now, which a lot of people do. They have chronic pain. But it's also about chronic disease. You cannot have chronic disease, meaning the diseases of civilization, meaning type 2 diabetes, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, you name the chronic disease, you cannot possibly have it if you have low inflammation, because those things are all inflammatory diseases that pop up as a direct result of unabated inflammation in your body. So if you're eating keto and your purpose in eating keto is to be healthy, you can rest assured that your body is calmed down because of keto. The inflammation is lower because of keto, and thus your body is as optimally healthy as it can be and should be devoid of chronic disease. Now, there are cases where people come into keto later in life and they already have the development of some disease happening. For some people, it will reverse that development. For other people, they've already progressed to the point where it's going to come on, but maybe you lessen the effects of it. But for people that don't have any inflammation, you can't have chronic disease. All right, let's see what you guys have to say. Welcome in, welcome in. Thanks for being here. Hello, Lori. Hello, AsGeo111. Hello, Kimberly. Hello, Ashton. Hello, Deb. Hello, RL Blackbean. Thank you guys for being here. Hello, Joette. Deb says, I love my red meat. Yeah, it's delicious. And knowing what it's giving you, Deb, is what kind of gives me peace of mind about eating red meat. I've never feared dying from it, clogging my arteries, getting cancer, all these kind of dastardly things that the vegans try to throw out there as propaganda. I've never, ever bought into that nonsense. I know when I'm consuming red meat, it's nourishing my body. It's giving me complete proteins, all the amino acids, the complete amino acids that my body needs to function the way it's supposed to function. Hello, Honey Got Keto. Thanks for being here. Hello, Bishop. Lori says, saturated and monounsaturated fats always confuse me. I just don't know which is which. All right, Lori, let me help you out, darling. Saturated fats are mostly butter, coconut oil, lard, mostly the fats that you find in dairy. There's obviously saturated fats that are also in meat and eggs. Those are all your primary sources of saturated fat. Okay. Monounsaturated fats tend to be the ones that are found in things like avocados, avocado oil, olive oil, olives, some nuts and seeds, although nuts and seeds also have polyunsaturated fats, which you still need a little bit of those, but not gobs of them. So it shouldn't be confusing at all about which is which. Obviously, if you have any questions, you can always look it up on Google. You can type in whatever the food is. And most of the time when you do just put in the name of the food and then nutrition facts, it'll pop up on the screen how much saturated fats in it, how much monounsaturated fats in it, the omega-3 fats, omega-6. So don't get confused by this. Don't let that hinder you from knowing what to do. There's no reason to be confused. Just embrace the food, look it up, do a little education, and you'll learn. Alberto says, some vegans say that meat is bad because of hormones, RBST, poor animal diet, but they forgot that Monsanto survives because of grains, and they feed grains to every living thing they can. Alberto, you are hitting on something so good here, because the processed meat industry, the feedlot meat that you buy in grocery stores, those can tend to be a lot more inflammatory than grass-fed meats and pasture-raised animals. So it's one reason I'm such a fan of people getting higher quality sources of meats. If they're going to choose to eat, the meats like that, they want to get the best quality that they can. And so if we counter their argument by saying, well, we don't eat that kind of meat, we have grass-fed and grass-finished and the best quality that we can find, then they have to turn to some nonsensical argument in order to counter that. But they're right. There are hormones injected into these animals. They end up on grocery store shelves. They're not feeding them well. They're feeding them with grains. They're using all kind of fattening techniques to try to get a higher price for the cow. Yeah, it's really horrible what they're doing to animals, all at the altar of making food available to Americans. If Americans would stop buying that crap and would start supporting local farmers and farmers markets, I think things would change in that aspect. But that's a good point. Those are highly inflammatory, much more so than grass-fed animals. RL Blackbean, why are doctors so afraid to get behind keto? I asked that question. It's so funny you asked that, RL Blackbean, because I'm writing a book right now. I'm in the midst of doing the manuscript, taking a little break to do this, this Jimmy Rants. But I asked that question of Dr. Ken Berry for a Moment of Clarity quote, that exact question, that why aren't doctors on board with this? And so I don't think doctors, to the topic of this Jimmy Rants, I don't think doctors realize it's anti-inflammatory. They understand the mechanism of inflammation, but what they don't understand is that you can lower inflammation through lifestyle and diet. They know a drug that will lower inflammation. They have all of these things. In fact, that's what they think, that statin drugs, the primary benefit of a statin medication is not cholesterol lowering anymore, it's inflammation lowering. And so they have drugs that will lower inflammation, but they're just not aware, because they weren't taught in medical school, that you can lower inflammation through diet. So I'm really happy to see in this Costco magazine that they at least are talking about the foods that can lower inflammation. They just got the information wrong. Hello, Jumping for Keto. Thanks for being here, Jenny. Ashton says, just took steak out of the freezer for dinner tonight. Attaboy. All right. Tell the girls I said thanks for an amazing breakfast. Oh, she got some of my eggs, Jenny did yesterday, so. Let me see if I can talk chicken. Okay. Keto Neogenesis, Beth said, it is confusing to me as well. I understand that there are different types of patch, but I don't understand how or why we need the variations. Could you explain that? So if you got a copy of my book, Real Food Keto, in there we talk about the various kinds of fats that are available, and how much of what kinds of fats you need. And it tends to lean more on monounsaturated fats as the priority, saturated fats next, and then just enough polyunsaturated fats to give you the omega-6s, which are essential. So don't make this confusing. If you've got a copy of Real Food Keto, or if you don't, go get a copy, because it's got all of that information in there, including what foods to get those fats into your diet. Natasha Loves Keto says, I'm in the process of trying to find a doctor that supports keto. I tried your source, but there aren't any near me, at least not that are open about it to be listed. Yeah, Natasha, that is unfortunate. KetoDocs.com, by the way, or KetogenicDocs.com, if you're looking for a doctor in your area. Sadly, all I can do is list the ones that I know about. If I don't know about them, I can't necessarily list them. So if you happen to hear about doctors that are in your area, or that you hear about that aren't on my list at KetogenicDocs.com, definitely let me know and we can get them added. But the next best thing is to try to find a doctor that will see you virtually. So there are several people that will see you virtually. Most notably is my Keto Talk co-host, Dr. Will Cole. He's a functional medicine practitioner out of Pittsburgh. About 80% of his patient population is people around the world that he sees on Skype. So if you want to go to drwillcole.com, I'm sure he'd be happy to see you as a patient. Lexi Bell 9 says, good morning. Couldn't agree more. I saw an immediate change in the way my body felt in regards to inflammation once I started keto. And here's the thing, you don't always feel the change in the inflammation. Most people do that dealt with little chronic aches and pains and things like that. But not everybody feels the inflammation. You hear inflammation, it sounds like your body's on fire, and it literally is a low-level version of a fire inside the body. But what happens is it does lower that inflammation, and it may take a little while for people to actually feel the effects of it having come down. But it does come down. Again, get those blood tests run, you guys, because they tell the tale of how well the anti-inflammatory effects of keto is working. Kitty Caddick says, heading to get some amazing beef and beef liver at the local farmer's market. See, she knows. She knows. Natasha Loves Keto. When I ask an office, they just say their doctors are up to date on all the weight loss diets. That tells me they don't know what in the world keto is. Yeah. Sadly, we're going to have to keep educating them as patients, which I want them to pay me tuition payments at this point. If I have to educate my doctor, he's got to pay me some tuition. Bertrand 6224 says quality meats only from farmers. What about butcher shops? Well, if a butcher shop sources good quality meat, that's great. Order from the butcher shop. A lot of butcher shops, though, even they get animals that are from the grain-based fed system. So you got to ask them, how was the animal raised? Was the animal grass-fed? Was it grass-fed? You know, ask questions. And most butchers are very forthcoming about where the animal came from. It makes sense, though. I feel like they are in a box and don't want to look outside it. RL Blackbean, yes. Unfortunately, a lot of doctors are very comfortable with the way they've been practicing medicine. And now that people are very interested in lifestyle medicine, wanting to change their diet, wanting to, you know, seek ways to lower stress and optimize sleep and doing all these other things because they've heard about it on podcasts and read about it online and read about it in books, I think those doctors are going by the wayside. Those doctors are the ones that are getting old and wearing out and retiring early, or should be retiring early. Meanwhile, newer doctors are coming up and they're like, oh yeah, I embrace this. I want my patients to be healthier, even if it's outside the realm of what I learned in med school. Alberto says temperature, 76 degrees Fahrenheit, and consistency of the fat can also be a good reference to know if it's saturated mono or poly. Thank you for that, Alberto. So yes, if you have a saturated fat, it will get solid at below 76 degrees. So this time of year being the winter, if you leave, and I've got ghee in a big jar from Pure Indian Foods. Love, love, love using ghee in my cooking. Ghee is basically clarified butter. They take the proteins out of the butter so it's not, some people are sensitive to the proteins in butter. So I'm not, but I just like the taste of ghee. So I leave it out on the counter, and this time of year, it tends to be solid. Same with my coconut oil, it tends to be solid. Now in the summertime, July, August, I'll leave both of those out on the counter, and they're both liquid all summer long. So it is pretty amazing. How do you get started on keto? Coco Labinky. Lala Binky, thank you for being here. Welcome, by the way. If you want to get started on keto, I say you need to educate yourself about what it is. And you need to know that it works because it doesn't help you lose weight. It works because it lowers inflammation in your body. And if you lower inflammation in your body, then you'll be able to lower your chance of getting chronic disease. You'll be able to lower whatever it is that's causing obesity to happen on your body. So I highly encourage you to educate yourself, get basic knowledge about what keto is. And if you do that, then you can start implementing it in your life. And I just happen to have a resource about that called Keto Clarity. Go pick it up. It's on Amazon. It's in Barnes & Noble. Wherever you buy books, you can get a copy of Keto Clarity, and it will explain in great detail all the ins and outs of how to do this and how to get started. Lori says, we make our own ghee. It's so easy and much cheaper. Yeah. All right. So the bottom line, you guys, in this Jimmy Rants, keto works because precisely it is anti-inflammatory. So when you read articles like this one that was in Costco Connection that say eating to stop inflammation, the right diet may ease chronic pain and other illnesses, and they don't make any mention of keto in here at all, and instead they tell people to eat things like whole grain, sweet potatoes, beans. No. Just no. Don't buy everything you read. All right, guys, that's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. As always, head on over to jimmyrants.com, and you'll see how this works. We start off on Instagram a couple times a day. Go follow me there at Livin' Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. And then you can watch live, just like all these awesome people did here today. And then it's up for 24 hours on replay that you can watch on Instagram. Then it, poof, disappears. But never fear, we put all the archives of these on YouTube. So go type in Jimmy Rants as a keyword on YouTube. You'll find these episodes. And then finally, we have a Jimmy Rants podcast, which has the best of the best highlights of this here show, jimmyrants.com. So until next time, we'll see you then.